Well, welcome back to our latest podcast of Leading with GenAI. And I'm super happy that we've got a star guest today. We have Jeff Wellstead, my old mate, an American in England. And we do like to keep it international here. Jeff's background reads a bit like a sort of a who's who in the branding world, big consultancies like Merrill Lynch and Morgan Stanley in the past, and quite a few tech companies that I think we've crossed over in the past with Jeff as well. And we worked together a while ago with a digital transformation consultancy, which was yesteryear's buzzword, and now we're jumping on the GenAI bandwagon, right?
Yeah. Right, well beyond
digital.
Yep.
Yeah. And obviously we want to demyth that a little bit. And today's topic is what it means for organizational change and skills development, etc. And as well as having Jeff on here, Pat's also been really active in this space lately as well. So he's going to share a bit of a mind map and help us hopefully keep a little bit of focus for today. So Jeff, super happy to have you here. Really keen to hear more about this whole, as I think you like to put it, employee life cycle and the organizational management.
Cool. Yeah, no, it's really, really an honor to be here with you guys. I've heard wonderful things about you through Rob. It's always wonderful to be surrounded by super smart people who are coming at this from different perspectives. So really looking forward to a very valuable discussion today in specific in terms of the application of AI to real world problems and solutions. And I know Pat has some wonderful stories to share with us and a terrific full color mind map in terms of some of the typical issues he's been bumping into working with HR teams. And I think that's a terrific, kind of jumping off point to kind of get straight into, what is this AI stuff and how is it actually going to be affecting us on a regular basis. So that's great.
Yeah. So I tell you what, Jeff Davis, can you pop up that image and then we can kind of talk to it and I can explain the context of how it came about.
Yeah.
Okay, so
there we go.
This is basically, thanks. This is basically the output from a workshop I was running with some HR executives, actually from a number of different companies. So it was a fairly open session. And we were using ChatGPT and then put it through into a mind map, through the whimsical mind map, and we were kind of playing around with it. But we're basically structuring our thoughts. And these were, of course, very generic thoughts because people didn't want to share too much, but these were the key areas that dominated the discussion and basically around reskilling at scale, but not just actually skilling the workforce across the teams, across the functions, but also we were talking about the mindset and the skill set, the tool set at the senior leadership team and the board team as well, because that's kind of critical to take into consideration. And then this concept of managing a hybrid workforce, and we're not talking about location here, obviously, we're talking about automation and agents and evolving LLM capabilities. That took up the most of the discussion because essentially the tools are advancing on an almost daily basis, and they're being absorbed into the workforce, both in our organizations and also in our competitors, customers, partners, at different rates. So this actually took up the biggest element. And then it was all back to the mindset actually of leaders, and how does the mindset of the leaders kind of respond to all of this, maybe productivity improvements, what do they do with those savings, and how do they think about planning for next year and growth and all this kind of stuff. So that's the context of this.
Well, thank you, Pat. I mean, there's quite a few topic areas there, and I think before we dive into those topics, you raised something just then, which is to do with the adoption and the different rates. And I just wondered for both you, Pat, and also for Jeff Wellstead. Sorry to sound so formal, but we have two Jeffs today. So, Jeff, what are you seeing in terms of adoption? I mean, before we get into the details here, how are we seeing the adoption of AI in HR? Is it, are they laggard or are they forward thinking?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I guess I would throw out that they're probably lagging at the moment, to be honest with you. I don't want to go so far as to say that they are Luddites in terms of just absolutely rejecting it out of hand. But there is look, this is my quick take on it, and I'm just going to be brutally honest about this. But I think this is likely true based on a lot of conversations I've had with senior HR leaders in this space. The HR function, from a legacy perspective, up until now, has been absolutely hamstrung from a cognitive load perspective by the depth and extreme nature of kind of like the regulatory bastion that they've had to kind of like look after. HR today, given the fact that it's got a mountain of employment law to look after, so compliance is really critical. A mountain of kind of internal turmoil because organizations are on an ever increasing cycle of needing to kind of redefine who they are in the marketplace to compete in new and different ways at speeds we've never seen before. And now with the advent of AI kind of jumping into the fray, there is likely going to be a very significant disruption from a business perspective, not to mention the geopolitical issues that are going on, global economic issue, headwinds, all sorts of things. HR has really kind of found itself hunkering down, you know what I mean, in the trenches, and trying to figure out not only how do we survive this, but importantly, at some point, how are we going to basically step up to what is clearly a whole pile of strategic initiatives and imperatives that HR can contribute to, because it's going to be essential given the depth and breadth of change. We're not talking minor change. We're talking like major change across organizations, that we figure out a way for the HR teams to get out of the cycles of administration, compliance, and governance, functions over and over again, and being the HR help desk, as well as kind of being the inbound reactionary force that is dealing with just a mountain of difficulty. Because HR has been like this for quite some time, it has therefore typically attracted people who, by their very nature, kind of gravitate toward administration, compliance, and governance. It's unusual, quite frankly, that I run into an HR leader or an HR team that is all about being new, inventive, recreative, and wanting to basically kind of turn, the sort of traditional HR model on its head. I think the other issue compounding this is the concern that AI seemingly popped up out of nowhere, generative AI. As a result, these companies that have built these models, these large language models, have been competing at a pace that, again, blows Moore's law out of the water. In fact, every law that we ever probably embraced previously in terms of speed, in terms of complexity, in terms of capability, it's happening on a week-by-week basis, right? Not a year-by-year basis, not quarterly, whatever. It is happening like every day in terms of the strength and power of these models. And the challenge, the challenge for HR in this space is one of concern, typically taking, again, a governance and compliance kind of approach for accidentally releasing, sensitive information out there into the training models and out to the larger web, basically, and losing control of that stuff, and therefore violating, data protection right issues, GDPR issues, and things of that nature. And so there's a lot of reticence in terms of just wholesale jumping straight into generative AI and saying, hey, here's all my data. Go make sense of it for me, do some wonderful things. So there's a bunch of learning and education that needs to take place to kind of get people comfortable with the fact that you can structure large language models through the use of APIs, through the use of firewalls and so forth, to make sure that data stays on your side of the fence. You can also anonymize data, which is another way of going going at it, such that you basically take out personal information, sensitive information. But again, that can be a slippery slope and mistakes can happen. So there is reticence about the use of these tools, especially given all the hype about, geez, this tool can now do this, and it can now use speech in 35 different languages, and it can have, emotionally intelligent conversations with you, and it can do logical, kind of mathematical solutions. So it's just lots of noise in the system. So I don't see a significant degree. In fact, I think I've seen several surveys that say that basically something like 10 to 15% of the global HR enterprise HR teams have kind of adopted HR wholesale and are really kind of diving into it. It's very much toe in the water right now for these folks. And so it's, it needs to be a big push to kind of get them comfortable with what's happening. One more thing I'd say about this is, what is happening is, for a lot of existing HR technologies, there's a lot of effort right now kind of being put into where can we inject generative AI capability into things like the performance management cycle, or the performance management skill gap analysis development cycle, to create more of a kind of performance development infinity loop for people. Where can we kind of take a look at payroll data as an example and use tools like Compa as an example? There's a variety of them kind of emerging all over the place, and kind of apply all sorts of fascinating AI looks to get three-dimensional data across the entirety of our organization and do deep dives into all sorts of fascinating insights. So there's a lot of that happening, and that tends to be seemingly a safer way to go for folks, as opposed to just, going directly at it in terms of, deploying Claude 3 or ChatGPT 4.0 or Strawberry or whatever it is nowadays, and just, having a go at it. But anyway, we can talk more about some of the specific use cases I've seen. But
before I bring Pat in to sort of grill you on some of those points and maybe use the mind map to sort of drill down on some of it.
Yeah.
I want to ask you I guess a more personal question in a way, Jeff. So, you're consulting at the moment, these different businesses out there, but you're quite uniquely placed in terms of, you used to work, I remember you used to work for Semantic back in the day. So that's all about data security, etc. You work for Nuance, which is all about, voice, etc. But you're also working as an HR director yourself. So, you probably, forgive me for saying this, but as the HR director, you probably weren't really that involved with the tools that your businesses were actually using. But now you can use a lot of those technologies as an HR director. And so if you were back in your old role as HR director, would you be a laggard or a Luddite?
No, I'd be right out there in the front, to be honest with you. I'm a Trekkie, from way back. I've been imagining the world in sort of a sci-fi lens, through a sci-fi lens, pretty much my whole life, primarily in the HR space, because I'll be perfectly honest about my own career choice here. It wasn't brilliant initially, the first 17 years of my career, working for these major multinational investment banks and consulting firms and tech firms and pharma. I thought I was going to have this fantastic experience with, kind of leading bleeding edge technologies to really, again, kind of bring to life what is oftentimes seen as a very opaque asset in companies, which is people, that represents something like 75 to 80% of the balance sheet. And so it was always ever my desire to be that guy who could walk into the boardroom, with stacks and loads of data and fascinating insights and potential recommendations, commercial recommendations that would be adopted by the CEO and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. And man, oh man, it never seemed to happen. Really frustrating. And it wasn't until I came over here in 2004 and started working for, companies that were fast growth, well-funded tech companies that were looking to grow exponentially at speed, that had no kind of HR or kind of people strategy infrastructure in place, that I got to reinvent from scratch. And a big part of that was, we need tools. We need tools because we have piles of data. It's all over the place. It's inaccurate. It's dangerously loose. And I will never, ever realize that dream I had until I get tools here to help me make sense of it. But even then, it was years before anything like generative AI came along to start really making powerful sense of all this data. And so for me, the past 2 years have been an absolute awakening. And I've been doing the deep dive every day. I can't absorb enough about AI, and I can't stop thinking about the potential use cases, basically to help drive forward a much more powerful relationship between employees, between HR, line managers, and leadership in terms of how it is they run their companies. So I've always ever been very forward thinking and chase down all sorts of new technologies as often as I can do.
Yeah. Jeff, one of the things that really interests me,
said, you've drunk the Kool-Aid as well. Yeah. So, go on, Jeff.
Yeah, for sure. So, Jeff, something really interests me, and referring to Pat's mind map here. We were talking about the reskilling the workforce. So I'm quite interested to dive into that. I'm doing a lot of work around sort of the agentic future and things now as well.
Yeah, good.
And I remember, I think it's Andrew Ng actually very famously said, AI doesn't automate jobs; it automates tasks. So it's not going to automate roles away; it's going to automate tasks. And there's a real challenge, isn't there, for organizations, large and small, to say, okay, we can automate lots of these tasks, and that allows us to redeploy our people in better ways. We can move on to higher order tasks. What does that look like for organizations? How do you start going about that if you're an HR director today?
Yeah, so just a couple of quick things for people listening in. So when you said the word agentic, it's a relatively new term, an expression for folks. So just to kind of explain, a lot of people have had experience with generative AI, which is basically a large language model that you can use natural language processing and ask it in seemingly plain language to dive into a problem that you're trying to solve, and then basically help you in a particular format generate ideas around how to solve for that problem and so forth. And that's often been sort of our experience. We type something in, or we talk something into an LLM, and it basically comes back with its best guessing and thinking on that whole thing. Agentic is this notion of creating agents, right, within AI that basically are connected to other software tools, as an example, or web-based tools that exist out there. And instead of saying, hey, I'm trying to solve for this problem, can you help me with this? You can't approach it that way, but it's a bit of a roundabout way. You actually know exactly what it is you do want solved. For instance, you have a marketing campaign coming up, and you've got to send out 150,000 cold emails. And you need help basically in structuring how this is going to work using your HubSpot database, and also using some clever branding from your marketing team, which you're going to upload into the AI tool. And what you're going to tell it to do is, hey, do me a favor, and in a very personalized way, create a letter that fills 3/4 of a page, and here's the messaging generally I want basically sent out, and I want you to use this database basically to go and send this out at a time that's most appropriate at the beginning of each person's day based on their time zone. And you could be that specific with it, and even get more specific with it, and click OK. And if you have everything kind of set up, that agent will go away and execute against that particular task that you set it to do. And it can do much more complicated things too, depending on how you've architected it. So, wow. Okay.
So Jeff, can I just quickly, quickly grab that, because I think it's really important what you just covered.
Yeah, go on.
We often, and I see a lot of people talk about, not yourself, but a lot of people talk about agents almost as though it's a binary thing. We go to this thing, suddenly it's this agent, an agentic future, and this kind of thing. Actually, there's so much nuance in agents, because you've got human triggered agents, which might just be what might have been referred to as circa kind of RPA, robotic process automation in the past, where and triggers it and says, right, here's a set of documents, go and perform the action that you're programmed to do on those documents, and off it goes, and then gives you a result. The human's still very much in the loop on that. You then got a sort of semi-autonomous agent, which is kind of what you're sort of describing there, to say, look, here's a campaign, go trigger, off you go deal with that. We then eventually get into this fully autonomous future, where actually the thing just knows, and this is some way off now, but is the holy grail almost, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where you've got agents that just, it becomes like a marketing manager to your description there within your company, whose role is to say, yep, I know what I need to do. You're talking about a campaign you want to launch. I know how to do that in the same way your marketing manager will do. And that'll be a fully autonomous agent that'll go off and go and do all that kind of stuff. So I think it's really interesting is that the agentic future is actually quite a journey to go through. And there's lots of different types of agents that can be used there.
Yeah, and it's happening today, right? Like I'm seeing adverts all over the place because I'm plugged into that based on the algorithms on social media and so forth, where they're claiming, "Hey, we can cover off your sales, your sales development representatives. We can cover off your marketing planning. We can cover off your digital marketing. We can cover off, on and on and on. The list goes. It hasn't gotten heavy yet. Like we're going to take over legal. We're going to take over HR. We're going to take over, these kinds of heavier, more complicated tasks. But basically, that's what these people are doing is, hey, I can build a bot that basically can handle, anywhere between 10 and 25 different challenging issues, as long as you have, from an infrastructure perspective, structured the data in such a way and structured my access to that information such a way that I won't be impeded. But if I do, I'll come back to you and say, hey, I couldn't do what you wanted me to do, and here's why. Can you please fix that? So, look, we're not exactly at the age of organizational general intelligence quite yet. But having said that, theoretically, it can come. It potentially could happen one day, but we're not there yet. So let's focus on what we can do. One of the big legacy challenges for businesses, as I've mentioned before, has been this issue of knowing your population, knowing your people in ways that you haven't known them before. And what I mean by that is, wouldn't it be amazing if we could know about everybody we employ in terms of what skills they have, what experience they come from, what knowledge they've developed? And this could be germane specifically to their role, but much more importantly, what about adjacent to their role and possibly way outside of their role? What if we had that level of color and insight in terms of every individual in the organization? And what if we have also gone out and basically scoured the web in terms of looking for real live current data around the types of jobs and roles that organizations like ours employ, and has basically unpicked, what the skills and skill adjacency is for those roles on a very reliable basis, such that in a matter of no time whatsoever, I can adopt a model that says, bring all of those skills, all of those competencies, and all that detail and map it to my existing role population, right? And just go ahead and parse that out. In addition to that, indicate what level of proficiency an individual at, say, a senior software developer role should have relative to this type of development. And boom, it can be there. Because, again, these tools and models have been scouring the internet and keeping track of all sorts of like real life and real time data flowing in and out of them, which is oftentimes what a lot of HR tech does.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting there, Jeff, about what you're talking about, and I look at this through that agentic world lens as well.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in what you're talking about. So if you map your organization and say, there's people and there's skills and there's tasks that people perform using these skills. And there was something you just mentioned there, which really triggered in my mind, which I quite like, is actually you could also map out what are the tasks we would like to do that we don't do, or what are the tasks that we do, but they're outsourced to external organizations we'd quite like to bring back in-house. And what are the things that we can't do today that actually we'd like to do? So I can imagine you'd end up with, I'm interested in your view on this great big skills matrix of these are the things we do well and we can do today, things we've outsourced, things we want to be able to do. And then your future state organizational design is then saying, okay, how do we best fulfill those skills? And that could be an agent. It could be a human carrier doing that task. Yeah.
So let me interrupt for a second. So Jeff, before you answer on that, I just want to pull Pat in because he wanted to make a point on the agents as well.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it kind of overlaps what Jeff were both saying. So I always look at things from a P&L perspective, and that's kind of how my brain is wired. And if you think about how resources are typically organized or have been in organizations, it's been allocated to teams, functions that have certain workflows in sales, marketing, R&D, distribution, and there are overlaps or interactions between each of those teams. But I think this agent thing is going to happen really, really quickly, actually. At different types of organizations, it will, happen at different speeds. But, I've been seeing a lot of YouTubes recently about how, first of all, employees are going to be able to start creating their own agents by dragging and dropping. But then there are also going to be agents strung together and then super agents sat on top of them, redirecting things. So what interests me is, what is that, if all of a sudden you have these these hybrid approaches to workflow that are constantly shifting, what does that do to your allocation of resources and costs across divisions or teams or functions? How do you start thinking about that? And, what kind of dynamics will that then drive in terms of, budgeting, organization, management, development? And that's where I think HR is going to have to come in, because every other function is kind of often looking out for their own, workflow or benefits. Sales have their own sales target, marketing, R&D, et cetera. Someone's going to have to look at this in a very fluid, dynamic way. And it's certainly not the IT department.
Right.
That understands, really, and can model and can simulate, which will also be possible pretty soon, I think, where all of this is going in almost in real time. And how do you actually measure and compensate your teams? And, you can't probably measure them on annual targets or even half-year targets very soon. So for me, those are the issues. How do you manage this transition to an agent hybrid kind of future in terms of resource allocation, costs, and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, really
oh my God,
question.
Nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. Look, what you just described. No. I think this is important. I don't have all the answers to this. I'll caveat everything I'm saying with that there are so many bright minds in the world around this space. But interestingly, we are all sharing a collective view on this stuff from various perspectives. So nobody has the one singular view. And I think at some point, Pat, what you just described, somebody who can come into an organization, understand what it does for a living, understand how it's performing, and how basically the sort of inner wheels in terms of people interactions and so forth are delivering those results, and then rethink everything and say, wow, what if we could get agents basically to do, who knows, let's just say conservatively 50% of the interactions that go on today, because there's so much basic administrative bureaucracy and all sorts of things that can be handled by a bot in no time flat. And what I mean by a bot, it just lives on your Microsoft, Teams, it lives on Slack, it lives in Google Suite, whatever it is you're using for internal comms. And all you ever have to do from a task management perspective is say, hey, can you do me a favor and just go fix this? And it just goes. It goes and does this. It notifies whoever it needs to notify, produces the result you're looking for, and you don't have to think about it anymore. And you're on to the next. And then at some point, you get a bot basically that just automates those other bots and just goes ahead and just kind of like runs through a day. And suddenly 60%, 70% of the garbage and the difficulty and the frustration you used to have to manage on your own, which was a big chunk of your job, is now fully automated, right? And it's connected to other systems in other parts of the business. So, and possibly other customer systems and all sorts of things. Go on.
So I'll interject for a second. So, in the interest of time, we normally try to keep this around about half an hour, but I think we could probably do a series on this, right?
Easy.
But I think that one of the things that we briefly discussed before getting this set up today, Jeff, was that you were talking, about the employed life cycle, and we also talked about maybe we can narrow down to some specific user cases. But I think the big picture that you've just been describing there is really important for, these skill-based organizations, as you said before. But what we've also done with all of these podcasts so far is how you can, go beyond the basic tasks and be able to focus on the more advanced tasks. And I think a lot of the tools that you probably can get into will help us understand how HR can get all of the dull tasks out of the way and can be doing much more informative, sellable tasks and upskilling the organization and impacting the bottom line, as Pat was saying. So do we want to take the last few minutes to maybe say, hey, look, we understand the big picture here, but could we drill down to maybe we like to do this, what's new and what's cool, to break it down a little bit. Cool. Maybe there might be a few tools out there that are being used in organizations that are HR focused. Yeah. I'm trying not to say the HR department, right?
Yeah, I know. And at some point, it's not going to be called HR anymore, right? It's going to be called something like people systems or something like that. But I mean, here's a really good use case, right? In terms of solving for this skills-based organizational approach, which once you have it all set up in terms of mapping all the skills to all the roles, but then importantly, you've then validated through assessment tools, how your employees basically perform against those required, kind of tasks or those required skills and competencies in the roles. People then know, where they stand. I'm holding my hand out now to say, this is my spider graph. This is what I have been assessed, not just by myself, not just by my manager, but also by my peers, possibly even my customers. And so I have a valid kind of an acceptable format in terms of who it is I am. And then here is what my role map looks like. And you can see that it's slightly askew, right? Instantaneously, now that I have that data for comparison, I can then plug directly into a learning management system and basically go and find learning solutions to basically cover off those skills. So I start to create more, at least academic and intellectual alignment using online training. But I also might be available to people who are mentors, who basically say, I'm expert in this and expert in that, and I can plug into them. I can plug into books. I can plug into all sorts of materials, and it automates the creation of a development plan for me so that I have like this rolling personal challenge for continuous improvement. And my manager now becomes a coach. He or she doesn't have to worry about, geez, I need to know everything there is to know about this person, because if I don't, then they're going to get lost in the whole developmental map, and it's not going to end well. Because that stuff is automated and the control is given to the employee, they can go off on their own journey and just get coached and directed gently by their managers, who then can also then get together and take a look at metadata across the entirety of your skills inventory and proficiency inventory, which then gets rolled up into much higher level discussions around things like, we're going to, kind of sunset these 3 products, and we're going to start and launch 5 new products in new markets. And instead of firing everybody who used to do the old products, we're going to kind of map this out now that we have this information to say, what skill adjacency and capability can we squeeze from the folks doing this older stuff to migrate then over into this new space? And how quickly can we do that? How many months? What's it going to cost us? And when can we be ready? Or maybe we just don't have these people in-house at all, and we should probably just go out and acquire a company that has this capability, or go hire people who are specialists in this space. We didn't have answers.
Get those skills from agents. If we've identified the
or develop agents basically to go manage it going forward, that kind of a thing. But we didn't have these options before, and so we were always ever running around in the dark with our personal opinions about who ought to stay and who ought to go and everything else. We spend billions of dollars basically screwing up these calculations over and over again, upsetting our human populations whilst we're doing it, and completely turning the momentum of the organization upside down. But today, if you have sort of the skills-based organizational approach, because now you have like some super detailed molecular data, you can do all sorts of fascinating mapping. Scenario planning, that's the other thing, Pat, that you talked about. How cool would it be basically to map 5 different possible commercial scenarios for the year, and then have that information populated by a very data-driven approach to understanding who do we employ to go make this happen? Where can we bring in automated bots, basically, and completely automate those processes? And where can we then possibly redeploy those people to do headier, more, fascinating and strategic work? So that's the direction these things are going. A couple of tools just to mention would be like Dev Skiller, as an example, is really fascinating in this space. Possibly better known would be companies like TechWolf or Eightfold or Fuel 50 or Beamery. They all have these funky, funny Silicon Valley names. But these are companies that interestingly built tools for things like recruitment or internal marketplace, internal mobility tools. And once they had that molecular skills, kind of information and data, they realized, holy cow, we could apply these models, predictive models and insightful models, to every aspect of the employee lifecycle, from attraction to recruitment to hiring, selection, to onboarding, to goal setting, to performance management and assessment, to skill gap analysis, to development, to promotion, to pay. All of these things can now be driven by data points that says, this is who you are, this is what you know, this is what makes you valuable, and basically here's where we're going to utilize you and where you can go utilize yourself, kind of thing. So that is the direction we're headed.
Sorry to interrupt your flow there, Jeff, but it's really interesting point you're making here. How do organizations, and I think this is a key thing, and I've heard this quite a lot from companies, how do they go about managing employees on that journey towards AI? Because obviously, you get quite a bit of resistance. I mean, one of the things whenever I run AI strategy workshops is one of the first things I do with the team is let's talk about the elephant in the room. Is AI coming for our jobs? And that's always the question they want to know. Yeah, and I often, slightly tongue in cheek reply to that. No, but it does mean you can go home on time, because it's going to help you become more efficient and that kind of stuff, yeah? And less work you're having to do on weekends. So I always try and sell that to them. The benefits of AI is absolutely huge. But, when we're sort of saying to employees, and I'm thinking back to my history when I worked for some very big organizations and things, is how do you get employees on board on that journey so they're not fearing AI and they want to take part in that? Because I think what would be really powerful is if you can get employees themselves to be saying, these are my skills, these are my daily tasks, and they're participating in the process. How do organizations get the employees on board? That's the question.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, that's a brilliant brilliant question. And I just attended a KPMG webinar just two nights ago, where the topic was exactly this issue of Gen AI adoption. And they, bless them, they're a big four, consultancy. So they have their slideware and their rather careful language that they use around this stuff. But the bottom line is that they had some really good thinking with regard to one of their people there was their principal in learning and development and change management. And the focus was, well, treat this like any powerful kind of transformation, kind of process, and create, for instance, awareness around this in terms of creating and collating or curating a whole bunch of free training, short, sharp, simple, powerful concepts to get people excited and enticed as to what this is, and remove the stigma that it's going to take your job and do horrible things. Then basically take them down, more of a rabbit hole from an educational perspective, and encourage them to basically go and do this stuff, because at the end, it's a bit like a treasure hunt. We're going to ask you to create some stuff using generative AI, and basically the best results, frankly, will win whatever X, Y, and Z, that kind of a thing, and probably, quite frankly, get you into an AI, career path. So they use this kind of term: awareness, engagement, adoption, enhanced productivity, innovation was kind of their pathway. And the idea is bypass the change curve, the bit where you go through the shock, the awe, the denial, the anger, and then end up in the pit of despair, right? And then, have to start experimenting to get yourself out of that. So hopefully then you kind of reach new heights after that. Leap instead straight through the use of visioning what their worlds could be like, in terms of stripping away all the garbage that they hate about their jobs, and share amazing ideas and actual stories where people have not only eliminated that stuff, but basically freed people up to use their brains in new and creative ways that, frankly, they've been dying to for so long, but just haven't been able to. And then say to them, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to educate you. We're going to lift you up. We're going to put you in front of the computer, in front of the tools, and we want you to start innovating. And we want you to come back and help us through the use of your interactions with AI. Help us rethink this organization, that kind of a thing. And so that was kind of the tack that they took, which I thought was neat.
And I'm going to leave that as Jeff's last big question, Jeff Davies' last big question, your big answer for him, Jeff. And I'm going to go to Pat to see if he's got any final comments or questions for you, and then I'll wrap it up after that. Yeah.
Cool. Great.
Yeah. No, thanks. Thanks for that, Jeff. I haven't got any final questions. I just want to mention that I've been testing advanced voice mode on ChatGPT last night, and it's incredible. The latency is amazing. I actually got ChatGPT advanced mode to listen in to a Notebook LM podcast that I created, which was a review of one of my novels, and
nice.
Have ChatGPT critique what was coming out of Notebook LM, and it was like it was pretty amazing. And then I got it to respond. I got it to respond in Finnish and then French, and interrupting it and all this kind of stuff it's going to be a game changer in terms of what people can do in different job options.
Well, Pat, you're not supposed to have it, right? They said yesterday they're not rolling out the advanced voice assistants in the EU, the UK, Switzerland, and some other EEA countries. So how you've got it in Finland, I don't know. But
enough with the envy. Enough with the envy.
Straight after we finish recording this.
Enough with the envy and jealousy, Jeff. Yeah. Enough with the envy and jealousy. So look, let's wrap this up by really thanking Jeff for being super generous with his time and transparent with his thoughts, and really cool. And I think that there's so much more we can be doing around this. So I would encourage anyone who's listening to this podcast to please post questions, comments, and responses. And we might be able to extend this into another conversation or respond through the comments. Jeff, you shared a few days ago, I can't remember what it was titled, but a really nice map of some of the different tools out there. If it's okay, maybe we can put that link in the comments with this.
Yeah, that was the stacked database, was it?
Stacked database. Sorry, that was the one. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely go share that stuff out. I'm all about radical collaboration, and I always amplify great stuff that I see. And that was a brilliant aggregation of new HR tech that's just flowing out there. A lot of it is AI powered, so it's very cool.
And great for someone who many years ago worked in recruitment and has been bombarded with CV tools and stuff at the moment. I'm glad we managed to avoid that one for today and focused on the wider benefits of AI for HR. So Indeed. On that note, thank you, everybody. Really, really, really good session today. Awesome. And
that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, guys, watching. Thanks.
All right, guys. Take care now.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah. Bye-bye.